Welcome to Theory of Pets. I'm a passionate pet owner with a drive to help others like me uncover the truth about the pet industry and what goes on behind the scenes. Good morning and welcome back to the fourth episode of Theory of Pets. For those of you who are new to the show, my name is Samantha, and as you can tell by the title, this week I want to talk about the importance of dog fences. In this podcast, I try to talk about all things dog and pet related, and one of the things that I feel many pet owners don't know enough about is fencing. I know it sounds a little silly to make an entire show about dog fencing, but it's really important for a dog's safety, and I find that most people don't understand the reasons behind fencing or all the options that are available. I think a lot of times when we hear fencing, you think of either these adorable little white picket fences that couldn't keep in a hyperactive or really large breed dog, or we think about these chain link barriers that are ugly and unattractive and nobody likes the way that looks in their yard. But there are so many other options and I wanted to bring those to your attention. And I also feel like we know a lot of people who have tried to do dog fencing on their own. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Oftentimes, if you have a small breed or a dog that really doesn't try and escape the yard very often, it's easy to be able to do that fencing on your own, to figure out the type of fencing and install it by yourself, because you don't need a super strong fence or a very tall fence to keep in a small breed. And if your dog's not going to try to escape, you don't really need to make it super secure. So oftentimes I do see that work, but we also know a lot of people who understand the fact that they need dog fencing because they do have an escaper. They have a dog that won't stay in the yard. They don't want to tether it to anything stationary or put up a dog run or anything like that. They want the dog to have a nice big area to roam around in, so they think of pet fencing. And then the first thing, and really the only thing that comes to their mind, is that chain link fencing that, some people don't mind it, but a lot of people don't like that big, bulky look. It takes up so much of your yard and it's just kind of an eyesore, especially, if you really pride yourself on the landscaping and the look of your yard. That's something that you don't want there. So that's something that we hear a lot from people as well. We really should fence them in, but we don't like, how big and bulky and ugly fencing is. There's so many other options. And if you have a dog that is trying to escape, if you need that pet fencing and it's really a safety issue, you really should work with a professional. And I would advise not to work with a professional fence company, but to actually work with a company that makes fences specifically for dogs. And the reason that I say that is because professional fence companies know how to install fence. They know how high and how wide and the look of fencing, and they're great with that stuff, but they don't know dogs. So you really need somebody that knows a little bit about both. And that's, I'm doing an interview, and you're going to hear that in just a minute, with a man from a company called Easy Pet Fence. And that's one company. There are certainly others out there. Whoops, there goes my dogs. But you want to work with a company that has knowledge of both fencing and dogs. And the reason that I say that is because dogs can be tricky. They're very unpredictable. They can escape a lot of regular fences that, we love the look of. Like, for example, those nice, lovely picket fences. There are spaces between the slats on those fences that dogs can, if your dog's small enough, he could maneuver through, but they can kind of get paws through and knock those loose and be able to get out. Sometimes those fences aren't high enough to contain a dog that really jumps or climbs, things like that. Some dogs are, we refer to them in our family as Houdinis, because they can try to get out of everything. They can try and climb over. They try to dig under. They try and go through. Whatever they can do to get out of that containment, they will do. And you really need to work with a company who knows both aspects of that, the fencing and the dogs. So that is my recommendation. And that's why today I spoke with a representative from Easy Pet Fence so that we could get some more information about those specific fences that are created for dogs. If you have any questions about whether or not you think that you need a fence, it really comes down to safety. That's the biggest thing. Can you contain your dog in your yard without a fence? That is up to you. Nobody knows, your dog and nobody knows, your situation. We live in a more rural area, so not that I want my dogs to escape the yard, but if my dogs do wander, there's a lot of wooded area. We live on a very back road. We actually live on a back road that's off of another back road. So we live way out in the middle of nowhere. And again, obviously I want to keep my dogs contained, but are there major safety issues for them if they wander off for a little while? Probably not. Certainly not to the extent that there would be if you live in a more urban area, if you live on a main road, if there's cars going by, if you live, like, say, around an area where you have lots of neighbors. There are other things, a lot of people think cars immediately when their dogs get out, but you also have to think about other dogs. There might be other aggressive dogs in your neighborhood that stay in their yard, but if your dog wandered into their yard, then they'll be aggressive. There are issues about what your dog's getting into. Do you have neighbors that maybe your dog can find a way to get in their garage and get into things like chemicals, antifreeze, different things that would poison them? Are they going to be getting into somebody else's trash, eating chicken bones, then, having their stomach punctured, or, getting into some poisonous material or toxic material in the garbage? So there's a lot of other safety concerns that don't necessarily focus on your dog getting hit by a car or, just kind of wandering and getting into trouble. So that's something to think about as well. So today I spoke with Martin Havrilla, and he is the office manager at Easy Pet Fence. And Easy Pet Fence is one of those companies that I was talking about. They specialize in fences for pets, not just dogs, but cats and chickens as well. So they've worked with pet owners who have had all of the same questions that you're probably having about, how to contain their dog. And some of them probably have more easygoing dogs that aren't going to try to escape, and they just put the fence up for a safety measure. But some of them also have climbers and diggers and things like that. So Martin's going to talk a little bit about that, and I will jump right into that interview and let you guys hear that information. All right, so today I am speaking with Martin Havrilla, and he is from Easy Pet Fence. They offer all kinds of different options for different pet fencing, from dog fencing to chicken fencing. And today we're going to talk a little bit about fencing, the different options that are available, and the humane fencing that Easy Pet Fence offers. So thank you, Martin, for your time today and for joining us on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Samantha.
No problem. So we talked a little bit before I started recording just about how, pet fencing is sort of one of those things that you think about when it pops up and you need it. But obviously everybody thinks about pets escaping the yard, and that's why they would want to fence them in. But there are a lot of actually good reasons to fence in your dog. Can you tell us a little bit about why people look for fence for their pet?
Yeah, there's lots of great reasons that people need to consider fencing when they get a new dog or moving to a location, or they have just a dog and need to kind of upgrade what they have. The fence that we sell is a physical fence that you put up around the property, and we really like that solution for a number of reasons. In comparison to some of the other options out there, our fence, when you put it up, it is a physical barrier that provides a safe and secure environment for a dog to play and be active. And one step that a lot of people don't think about with a physical barrier like that is it also keeps out predators and other animals, unwanted animals. So if you have smaller dogs, that's a really big consideration to make sure you keep in mind.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Great. And you guys, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yeah, so also one of the bigger parts is the exercise is huge for dogs, and you need to make sure they have a place that they can safely go out and exercise for at least 30 minutes a day. Even longer if you have older dogs that need to get out more and kind of stretch their legs. Helps build strong muscles and bones, and really helps with longevity and quality of life for the dogs.
So when people are thinking about a containment system for their dog, do you have specifications? I'm sure there's different things for large breeds compared to the small breeds.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the bigger factors to take into account is the type of dog you have and the size of dog you have, because there's different strengths and different sizes and heights available, all suitable for different types of dogs. And then the other thing to consider is energy level. As we all know, all different breeds have different kinds of energy levels. Some will run around all day long. Others just need a place to kind of trot around and sniff. And we have solutions for all of that. The third consideration is really going to be kind of the attitude that your dog has and really the kind of things that they're into. Some dogs like to dig, so we have solutions that will keep dogs from being able to dig out and escape under a fence. Other dogs like to chew, so that's another important consideration when you're putting a fence up as well.
And do you ever have dogs that can jump over or climb over fencing?
In rare cases, you see, or we've all seen pictures of dogs that are, Houdini and can escape through a lot of complicated fencing systems. But we have a couple accommodations that we can make for dogs that can climb as well, that include arches and things that make it really difficult or impossible for them to get out over top of a fencing system.
Wonderful. And I know a lot of people, the look of that physical barrier, they don't want that, so they try the electronic fencing. What are the differences between the physical barriers and the electronic fences that some people opt for?
Yeah, so at Easy Pet Fence, we don't have any of those electric fencing options because we prefer to go with the more humane solutions. It is a physical barrier, which means that it is possible to be seen, unlike those electric fence options. But it comes with a number of trade-offs. So we view the electric fence options as kind of more of a training by punishment technique. In other words, there's an invisible barrier there for the dog as well, and he has to kind of learn and associate this noise and this shock with kind of the end of a boundary environment. And to our way of thinking, that creates an environment for the dog that's not necessarily as healthy as it can be. It allows them freedom to move around freely, yes, but they also maybe potentially don't know their boundaries, and also has issues involved with escaping dogs that then cannot return back to their own yard. They're essentially prohibited from being able to gain entry back to their own yard if the dog does break.
Right, if they cross that line to come back in.
Right. They go out and then all of a sudden now they can't even get home. So you've got a dog that wants potentially to come back in and can't. So we put up it is a physical barrier, humane fencing. And what we really like about it is that it does provide the dog a visible knowledge of its area. In other words, its domain, its territory is there. It knows exactly what it's got. And then from there, it allows for a couple other advantages. One of the ones that we really like, again, is the potential to keep out the other predators and animals. But also one that we like that a lot of people don't consider as well is that, dogs like to socialize as well. They like to interact with other dogs. When you have a physical barrier like our pet fence systems, you can bring other dogs over. They can play. Compared to some of these electric fence options where if you have a neighbor's dog that wants to come over as well and it can't because it can't go and play in the backyard, there's no contained area for them both to play simultaneously.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And I know there are different styles of fencing. I did browse through your website, which is easypetfence.com, and I will link that in our podcast notes as well so that our listeners can jump on there. But there are different styles of like the hexagon-shaped webbing and then the square shaped webbing. Is there a difference between those different styles?
Yeah, there absolutely is. So the square mesh it's a polypropylene material. It's a recyclable plastic material that you can put up, and that works really well for kind of the more laid back dogs, the dogs that aren't going to chew on the fence because it is a plastic fence. If there's a dog that likes to chew, eventually that could become an issue. So as a solution for that sort of thing, we do offer that steel hex fence that you described there, and that is it's a steel wire with a PVC coating on it, so it's black and looks really great, but it prevents the dog from being able to chew its way out and try to escape that way. We do also have welded wire options available, which is kind of a more finished metal look, a little bit beefier, a little bit stronger if you've got really active dogs that really want to try to push those limits that the fence is in place for them.
And what about installation? Because that's, I think, one of the questions that I hear a lot from pet parents is that these electronic fences, you either have the little box that's in your house or you do the underground wire and you snap the collar on and you're good to go. And they're worried about the installation of a physical barrier fence.
Yeah, sure. We've taken as many steps as we can to make this installation really super easy for pet owners. Basically, our system comes with a sleeve that you drive into the ground. You're just right there at ground level. Everything's easy. You drive that sleeve in, and it kind of self-sets the height of your post that you're going to put the fencing on, and then really you just unroll this fencing along those posts that you create for your barrier, and you've created a protected area. It's really nice that it has this system because it is then temporary with these sleeves, which means that if you want to set up an area that you only need for certain times of the year or for certain areas, you can then pull that fence up when it's not in use, if you don't need it year round or if you don't need it in certain areas all the time, or you want to create an area further back on your property that it gives it kind of a modular aspect that makes it really easy to use and maintain.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that that I had never thought about. But now that you bring it up, we have friends that have dogs that need to be fenced in, and one of their problems is if they move, then that fence that you installed, if you do a traditional chain link fence or nice wooden fence, either you have to dig that fence up and move the whole thing, which is really could be a hassle, or you have to spent that money to put up a fence at one house and now you're moving and have to put up a second structure at the new house.
Yep.
That's a great benefit.
Yeah. Yeah, it works really well for that. And, people use it all the time to create just little special dog areas or dog runs if they've got really big properties. Like if they have a back area that they like to work in and don't want to have to fence all the way through, they can create a really nice large area at a really reasonable price in the back half of their property, and then they have bigger fences other places.
Sure. One of the things I noticed on your website too that just it struck me as funny because we live in a rural area and we do have cats, but they come and go kind of as they please through a cat door. You guys offer cat fencing too, and I think that was like I said at first, it struck me a little funny, but for people that live in more urban areas, I'm sure that that's actually a very popular thing, and their cat can get some outside time without having to worry about running off or going into the street or things like that.
Yeah. Cat fencing is actually really big for us. It's kind of a surprising market for us as well. We really like the way that it provides an opportunity for the cats to get outside because that is truly one of the bigger challenges. But it has this really great extender system that kind of comes in over the fence, and basically the philosophy there is as the cat tries to climb it, it's this metal at the bottom keeps them from chewing, and then they get to the next phase, which is the poly, which is a little more loose and floppy, and it kind of gives a little as they're climbing it, and then they hit this extender, which pushes them kind of backing up over their heads to try to escape, and they don't like that, so they don't tend to test that as a means to get out. And it's great because it finally provides cats a really nice opportunity to get outside and exercise, most importantly, but also explore.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, we, being in a rural area, that's not really an issue for us. But absolutely, once I thought about it, a cat fence certainly would be a great option for some pet parents living where their cats can't just roam free.
Yeah, well, and for a lot of areas like yours that are rural, we've found people are actually taking the fence and kind of readapting. What they're doing is they're taking those extenders that normally face in to keep those cats in, flipping them around, and now you can keep cats that you may not want in your yard or in your gardens. So if there are free roaming cats, you can then use that to kind of keep them out of the yard as well.
Oh, interesting. Wow, that's great. And I know there's pricing information and all that stuff on your website. And as I said, I'll go through and make sure that I link that in the show notes so that people can. I know it differs on what kind of fence that you want and how big you need it and things like that. So that's kind of a hard issue to talk about. Fencing, but are your fences safe for pets? I know some people worry about like if their dog jumps up on it or something like that, that the fences aren't going to be safe for their animals.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the fences are designed in such a way that they're going to be safe for the animals, and they don't have really any sharp edges or anything like a metal, like a chain link does, or potentially can do at the top, get those kind of sharp points or anything like that. Our fences all have really clean, finished edges that don't have anything like that. So if a dog were to try to get up there and put his paws up towards the top of the fence, there's no fear of cuts on the paws or anything like that either.
Excellent. So they're safe, they're affordable. There's so many different options. And again, I'll link that website so that people can check that out on their own. Is there anything else that we haven't touched on or talked about that you would like to make sure that everybody knows?
I think it's really important to note it's important to have a safe area for dogs to play, and that we prefer going with these really humane methods and don't really opt for the electric fences. We really like something that's there that will provide a nice, safe environment for play and exercise, just for the health and emotional well-being of everyone's pets.
Absolutely. I do. I worry too about those electronic fences, and we don't use those with our dogs. I think one of my worries, like you said, when they cross over that boundary, then they are now being punished to come back home. We always see, and I know they're few and far between, but sometimes those systems will have a flaw, and your dog can get hurt wearing that collar. That it will send a signal to him when he when he isn't even near the fence, and things like that. So there are a lot of different issues that pop up with those electric fences. The only thing that I can think of, I know some people that like rental properties and things aren't allowed to have a physical barrier fence that you can see, or it has to meet certain stipulations and things like that if you have like a homeowners association. So I know some people don't have much of a choice for the invisible fence, but if you can avoid those at all costs, I recommend that as well. I need to thank Martin for being here again. That was a wonderful interview, and I got a lot of my questions answered. Hopefully it answered a lot of your questions as well about pet fencing. I love chatting with him about the dangers of electric fences as well, and I know we made those very apparent, but a lot of pet parents don't have the option. Like I mentioned, if you rent or you lease, sometimes you're not allowed to put up any physical barriers, any visual barriers. So that's tough. There are options for fencing out there that are a physical barrier, but they are hard to see from a distance. So those fences are a good thing to check into too if you're thinking about fencing, but you can't, like a homeowners association, for example, won't allow any visible barriers. You can try those pet fences. They're certainly not invisible fences, but they're about the closest thing to it, and it does allow you that physical barrier so you don't have to have the electric fences. As we mentioned, the worry there is that if your dog does happen to cross the line, then he's blocked from coming back across the line, which will actually punish him for coming home, and that can be a really negative thing. The other thing that you want to keep in mind with those is that they'll keep your dog in, but they won't keep other animals out. And those physical barrier fences, the nice thing about those is that it will keep other dogs or other critters and other things from coming into your yard and hurting your dog. So there are a lot of benefits to physical barriers that electronic fences just really can't match. So hopefully you guys, like I said, got some great information out of this. And if you're thinking about fencing or looking into fencing, this gave you a great starting point. Again, the show notes are available on our website, which is theoryofpets.com. You can find those there. There's also a comment section there, and you can leave a comment or ask any questions. There's a place where you can record your question. So that would be great if you record your question. I might use it on a future podcast. So keep that in mind. If you're interested in that, I would love to hear from you guys, but you can also type your questions in your comments as well. And I will certainly try and answer all of those for you guys. I don't want to leave any questions up in the air. The whole goal of this podcast is to unite us all as pet owners and pet lovers and, get us all on the same page. If there's a question that you're asking, chances are there are other pet owners out there asking the very same question. So don't be shy. If you're not comfortable enough to record your question, that's completely fine. You can type it in there and I will make sure to get that answered. And again, I might feature it on a future podcast. So if you would be interested in that, that would be wonderful. If you're not interested in that, make sure you just mention that when you leave the comment or question that you don't want it aired, and I will make sure that I don't do that if you're not comfortable with it. If you enjoy this podcast and my previous podcast, please jump on iTunes. It'll only take a second. You can leave us a review, and that just helps raise awareness of Theory of Pets, and it'll help me spread the word a little bit faster. We can get some more experts in here, and it really gives me a boost when I reach out to experts in the industry to ask for interviews and if they'd be on the podcast. So if you guys really want to see this grow and we can get some more experts in here and kind of answer my questions and answer your questions, that's the best way to go. So if you could jump on iTunes really quickly and give us a review, that would be great. Next week, I have a really exciting interview to share with you guys. I spoke with a member of the Embark team, and Embark is a company that does dog DNA testing. So I know that sounds a little bit crazy to some people and kind of silly, but it's actually extremely beneficial. I'm really excited to share that with you guys and talk about that with the representative from Embark. So that will be next week. I hope you guys will tune in for that, and I will talk to you all very soon. Thanks for listening, guys. Have a great afternoon.